Hello and welcome again to Rewind. I'm Elizabeth Puranam. When we first launched Al Jazeera English more than 10 years ago, our goal was to seek out the sort of documentaries other channels simply weren't doing. Well, here on Rewind, we revisit some of the best of them to find out how they came about and how the stories moved on. Well, today we're rewinding to 2006 and one of the earliest of those programs. For more than 30 years, Mohamed Amin was a legendary figure in Africa, a photo and video journalist who chronicled the momentous events of the second half of the 20th century, a turbulent time for the continent. Mo and Me was a series made by Mohamed's son Salim, in which he tells the story of his father's career and camera picks, the agency his father created. A brave and highly respected figure in Africa, Mohamed came to global prominence when his film and photos of the 1984 Ethiopian famine shocked the world and led directly to the international Live Aid phenomenon. Well, today we're returning to the final part of the series, which tells the tragic story of Mohamed's death and the legacy he left behind. But first, let's take a look at some of the stories he chronicled for newspapers and TV stations across the world. Well, as you can see, Mohamed's career took him to the heart of the action in Africa, but in a tragic twist, he was finally to find himself unwittingly at the centre of a global story. Here is the final episode of Mo and Me.
My name is Salim Amin, son of renowned photojournalist Mohamed Amin. Dad was a regular commuter to Addis Ababa. One reason was that he published Salamta, the in-flight magazine of Ethiopian Airlines. We still do. Dad and business colleague Brian Tetley checked in on November 23, 1996. Flight ET-961 to Nairobi, a Saturday. Dad flew in first, Tetley in business. It was a last-minute decision to take Brian along. He hated flying. Captain Leul Abate takes me aboard a flight simulator. It's programmed to reenact what happened to flight ET-961.
Was there anything unusual? Did any premonition you had about this flight?
No, it was my daughter's birthday. I celebrated her birthday at home and I came out for the flight. It was a beautiful day, sunny skies, clear. It started out very nice.
when we took off, when the plane took off, before it even leveled out, we heard I heard some noise coming from the back, and then I noticed two gentlemen running up the aisles towards the cockpit.
So they came into the cockpit.
They came
How
into
many
the
of
cockpit.
them?
There were 3 of them. They took the fire extinguisher and they started beating the co-pilot. Go out, go out. I said, guys, hold on, what's going on? He said,
Yeah.
shut up. The flight is hijacked. Okay, no problem.
I saw Mohamed Amin come out twice the cabin to the passenger compartment in economy class and talk to some of us to try to assist him or to stand up against the hijackers. But most people were, I think, a little too scared. So I presume he's a very brave man. So yeah.
What none of the passengers knew was that the hijackers had demanded to be taken to Australia. Ironically, they'd picked Australia out of the in-flight magazine that Dad himself published.
Okay, guys, I told them, this flight is destined to Nairobi. We don't carry enough fuel to Australia. Let's land in Nairobi, we refuel, and then we can go to Australia. Otherwise, I told them it's impossible.
The hijackers refused to allow Captain Abate to refuel at Nairobi or Mombasa.
So you kept going out and you passed Mombasa, and then?
Past Mombasa, and I was trying to fly along the coast.
Right.
So that I don't want to be far from the land. Then he said, why are you flying along the coast? Australia is somewhere to this direction. And I told him, okay. I turned the heading. And now this message came, fuel, low fuel.
Yeah.
He told them, you see this? It says low fuel. We're running out of fuel, guys. So we just kept turning like this.
So you were circling the island at this point?
I was circling at the island. I decided I would not go anywhere else.
Right.
Because it's a dead end.
By now, flight ET961 was circling above the Comoros Islands.
So we just kept turning. I told them, guys, we're going to die. We're running out of fuel. I mean, we already lost one engine. Then started talking with the guys. And this time, I took my mic up. I told the passengers, ladies and gentlemen, we have lost one engine due to fuel starvation, and we're going to lose the other engine very soon.
He'd run out of fuel. He'd already lost one engine, and that he had no alternative but to crash land. And that's when we realized, well, this is ending differently. So we all thought that there would be negotiations. We'd go from maybe one airport to the other, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's when the panic set in, and reality actually dawned on us that, yeah, this could be the end.
One time, I heard the door open.
Yes.
So I turned it back. I saw your father standing on the aisle.
He was standing and talking to...
No, I just saw him standing. I don't know what he was doing. It was a brief moment.
I could see by the gestures he was making, he was trying to get people to stand up, yeah, and help him, and stand up to stand up to this threat. But most people were, I think, rather too scared, yeah.
You think it's because he had been in this situation many times before?
Yes, he's been in many trying situations, as we all know, and I guess he stands up to these challenges a lot easier than most people would. Yeah.
Now the airplane was descending.
Right.
It was good. He said, "Why are you turning? We have to go to Australia." I said, "Guys, this is finished now. We are all dead people now. Let me do it my way." And he said, I don't know how they did it. He disengaged the autopilot.
Disengaged it?
He did.
From this control
here?
Yeah,
from that control.
Right.
Then I disconnected the autopilot. Then I had to start flying it myself. And he was struggling like this, you know. He was pushing it like this. And I was trying to recover from that condition, you know. He was doing like this. And I was trying to recover.
People were screaming, shouting, calling up Jesus, Allah, yeah, running up and down the aisles, people trying to put on their life jackets and not finding them. It was chaos.
We were at 21,000, we lost the other engine.
Right. So you were just basically gliding after that point. At 21,000 feet, you were just gliding.
As of 21,000 feet, yes.
It started to get hot in the plane. The lights started to flicker, started to perspire, and the sun went dark. And there was all this, people were screaming, and there's a lot of panic in the aircraft.
I'm trying to do it gently this time, okay? So I told the co-pilot, okay, you have to hold it, hold it, hold it. And I was talking to myself.
As we came down and people could actually see water on both sides of the plane, it sort of went quiet. It was like the last few moments.
Okay, Zulu, now you're going to make it. Now you'll make it. Oh my God, okay?
And I just kept looking out the window, and I could see water.
This is good. This is good. Just hold it, hold it, hold it.
And then finally, I guess maybe 5 or 10 seconds before we hit the water, I went down, shut my eyes, and held on to the seat in front, just waiting for the impact.
Hold it, hold it, hold it.
A honeymoon couple from South Africa are taking photographs on the beach.
People were struggling to get out of their seats and, tugging onto others. And yeah, well, that was a bit scary because I was underwater. And of course, you have to hold your breath all this time. And there's the shock. Yeah, but finally, I did get out. And when I got out, I looked up into this. I saw the sky. And I said, okay, this must be the other side. I must have crossed over. And then when I leveled out and looked at the ocean, I saw these boats. They looked like tourists. Said, okay, I must still be around, so. Yeah.
The Comorans and the holidaymakers bring the passengers ashore, alive, dead, and halfway between. Of Dad, there is no sign. Of 175 passengers from 36 countries, 123 perished, including the hijackers. Of Dad, there was still no news, only an ominous silence. I went to Wilson Airport, Nairobi, with my friend Duncan Willits. We chartered an aircraft to fly us to Moroni, the capital of the Comores, where a makeshift morgue had been set up. So we drove to this meat factory. It was right near the ocean. And we went inside, and there was probably 80 to 100 bodies lying on the floor in rows. And they were covered by sheets. And we had to basically go through each one to find Brian and Dad. Brian Tetley was on the flight as well. We had to go through each one to find them. So Duncan started at one end, and I started at the other end. And I found Dad's body. And I really didn't know what to. I found his body, and I put the sheet back on, and I walked outside. And I basically broke down. What were your thoughts on that flight? We never actually talked about this when we were there. We didn't really say much on the trip there. Did you think he would have made it when we were flying over, or were you pretty convinced that he hadn't?
Well, I must admit, I was pretty convinced that he died.
Mm.
You know, we were trying to, tell you, he'll be all right, he'll be all right. He'll be having a couple of drinks there, he'll live it. But I knew he had because there's no noise from him.
Mm.
You know, had he survived, we would have heard. That was his job, to tell the world about it, to report on it. And sadly, this was it. I had a foreboding that they'd both gone.
What did you feel? You were close to the both of them, very close to the both of them. What did you feel at that time?
Devastated, absolutely devastating. That they'd gone in such a ridiculous manner. A completely nonsensical, useless waste of time manner, where a thing that should never have happened. I mean, car accidents happen. You know, they could have both died in a car accident. We all know that. But the fact that some people survived and some people didn't. 2/3 died, and that's what they say is the average for a crash in the sea. And unfortunately, our two... Brian was in business,
Yeah.
and everybody
Business
died. Your father didn't survive, but the guy next to him survived. Now, whether he didn't have his seatbelt fastened, which is typical Mohammed, well, don't need that, and he shot up, and a lot of them got killed because he cracked their head on the luggage thing.
Had he been able to choose a way to go, I think this would have been one of those, not necessarily the hijack or a botched hijacking, but the fact that it was the biggest story of the day. He wasn't even covering it. It was the biggest story of the day. It has put him down in that it kept his status to legendary because of the way he died. Had he just been, an old man that passed away in his sleep, the drama wouldn't have been there. The drama of his life wouldn't have been there. And he had that drama right to the very end. And, I think that in some way that gives you some consolation for whatever it's worth. His life philosophy was that if I can do it, anybody else can. We are in the most powerful profession in the world. The stories that we do reach millions of people. We can make a difference. And if we use that power responsibly, it can change the world. And it can change Africa, which desperately, desperately needs it. What you see in my office, and it is my office, it's not his office, it's my office, but what you see in my office is a memory to somebody that I idolized, but somebody that achieved more than any other African journalist has achieved in history. And I want to remember that. Whenever I feel that it's too much, that I can't cope with this, that I can't handle a situation, I just have to look around me at what he achieved, and I have the strength to continue. And I have his pictures around because I feel he's still watching over me. To a certain extent, I think I've spent the last years since he's died trying to prove to him that I am not the disappointment that he thought I was. I have this recurring nightmare of him not having died in that plane crash and walking into this office and screaming at me and saying, "What the have you done to my office? Where are all my things? Get out of my chair and get out from behind my desk. And what are you doing here?" I do have, it's not a nightmare that he's still alive. That's not the nightmare part. But it's the repercussions and me sitting there trying to justify what I've done over the last decade to immortalize his memory to a certain degree and to continue his legacy and to continue his company. I think there would be an inner peace that would come at a certain point in my life where I would feel that I have nothing left to prove to him. I think perhaps a string of awards, perhaps some recognition for what I've done would allow me to sit back and say, "Dad, I hope you're happy now."
The final episode of Mo and Me. Well, as we know, a lot has happened in Africa since 2006. And although Mo is no longer with us, his son Salim has carried on the camera tricks tradition. And he's here with us now to talk about keeping faith with his father's mission and the role of photojournalism in today's Africa. It is great to have you with us here today.
Wonderful to be here, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that your series, Mo and Me, was actually the first that was broadcast on Al Jazeera.
It was the opening series or documentary series that was done, and it kind of, you know, when I was pitching it to the original team that started Al Jazeera, I felt that it ticked all the boxes that Al Jazeera was stood for or wanted to portray itself as, which was stories from the South, stories that dealt with parts of the world that many other broadcasters rarely looked at. It was a story of a Muslim who wasn't a terrorist.
You say in the film that you have this recurring nightmare that you're never going to live up to the immense work of your fathers. How do you feel about that now?
I still have the same nightmare. I've come to terms with his life. His life was truly unique in an African context, in a global context. And, you know, the body of work, I've now spent time looking at the body of his work. It's just phenomenal. You know, over 3 million images that he clicked in 40-odd years.
How do you think Africa has changed in the 2 decades since his passing, both bad and good?
Well, I think it has changed. It's changed a lot. In some ways, it's changed more in the last 2 decades than it did in the last 50 years before that. The technology has been a huge leap. Things like mobile money and M-Pesa and all these apps and wonderful innovations that have come out of the continent. Leadership has been a massive problem. In Kenya alone, in 2017, we had, you know, this massive election problem. In 2007, we had post-election violence. In South Africa, we've got a whole change of guard with people getting fed up with corruption. So some things haven't changed, they've gotten worse.
How dangerous is it still to film in many parts of the continent?
You know, when he was operating, one of the things that he taught me was how to get in and out of war situations. And for him, no matter how gung-ho or passionate he was, no story was ever worth dying for. One of his favorite sayings to me, which I'll never forget, is he said, "I'm not afraid of the bullet with my name on it, but I don't want to be killed by the one that says, 'to whom it may concern.'" Going into a war zone, he said, the first thing I look for is the exit. It's not how to get in, it's how to get out. Because there's no point, if nobody sees your pictures, there's no point going to these places and putting your life on the line.
But in the end, unfortunately, he did die not from a bullet.
Yeah, it was a to whom it may concern kind of a situation. It was a case of his luck running out, but not just his luck, but a lot of other people. And it was a freak accident. It was a hijacking that was not necessary. It was unnecessary. It was a bunch of amateurs, if there's such a thing as amateur hijackers. These were a bunch of amateurs. Nobody to this day has ever been able to explain how they got on that plane. They were escaped convicts. Yeah. How they got passports, how they managed to make it onto that flight.
And he tried till the very end to convince them.
Yeah, but he had spent most of his life negotiating with armed maniacs. I mean, that was what he did for a living. And so he tried, he did everything. Remember, this was pre-9/11. Had it been post-9/11, I think, 100 people would have stood up and jumped on top of these guys and tried to take the plane back.
Yeah, and tragic end, but an absolutely extraordinary life. We thank you very much, Salim, for coming in and talking to us about him.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you
very much. Thank you. Well, that's it from us, but do join us again next time and check out the Rewind page at aljazeera.com for more films from the series. I'm Elizabeth Puranam. Thanks for joining us. See you again soon.